having two different styles, two different approaches, two different unique skill sets or perspectives, and you bring it together and work through it together to be able to communicate effectively in the home and with your children.
Welcome to the Dad Central Show, the podcast that helps overwhelmed dads conquer stress, build confidence, and become the father their family brags about. Join Drew Solon, a leadership coach and father of five, and Ed Gow Jr., a fatherhood advocate and contributor to the Good Men Project, as we guide you through the journey of fatherhood. We'll show you how to connect deeply with your family, manage your time and energy better, and master tools to become the dad you want to be. Let's get started. Did you know research shows that dads are more likely to encourage risk-taking, while moms are likely to focus on safety, and kids actually need both to thrive? Studies in developmental psychology suggest that fathers often promote independence and problem-solving through play, while mothers tend to nurture emotional security and structure. Instead of one being better, it turns out that this balance is exactly what helps kids grow into confident, resilient adults. Welcome, as always. You're watching the Dad Central Show, or Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. Also, our show is sponsored by Dove N Plus Care. Dove N Plus Care believe that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. And I'll say right at the front, we would like you to send us questions about fatherhood so we can answer them live. So please email us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. And today, Drew and I are going to be chatting about how moms and dads parent differently and why that's a good thing. Drew, what's going on?
And you and I were lamenting the change in weather. It was beautifully warm when a few days ago before we were recording, and now we both woke up to that fluffy white stuff, and not just a little bit of it, a lot. So we'll refocus for this conversation, and knowing that the differences between moms and dads can often create conflict or challenges, but maybe there's something we can share today that will help any parent recognize there's beauty in differences and there's value in differences when we shift the focus on why we're different to how do our strengths benefit our children. So hopefully that's what we're able to share today.
Absolutely. I am confident we will do that. So we're going to look at a few different areas today. We're going to talk about, first and foremost, the key differences, then why these differences are actually good. Then we'll have common conflict between parents, which never happens, and then practical takeaways. So Drew, let's start it off. What are the key differences?
Yeah, well, this has been interesting to me as I have been with Dad Central and learned a lot of the research foundation. Some of this I felt intuitively before being involved with Dad Central, but now the research really validates it. And so we got three key differences, and I'll talk about each of the three quickly, and then we'll jump in, go back and go deeper. So first one is risk versus safety. Dads often encourage riskier play, whereas moms are very much like, no, don't, stay close, avoid the risk. Play styles, dads tend to lean toward in a natural strength of kind of rough and tumble, spontaneous, unscripted, whereas moms like to have a bit more of structured and more of a nurturing, calmer, gentler play styles. Or communication styles. Moms traditionally a little bit more verbal, emotional processing, whereas dads are more take action, get solutions, and achieve things. So those are some of the common differences. And I think you and I can go back and forth on these, both lived experiences, what we experienced growing up, or even fathers we've worked with. And so let's start with the first one, risk versus safety. For me, the risk I think brings, some challenging maybe thoughts or emotions even, but risk is actually tremendously valuable, I think, because it helps you sort of know where the limits are, and not in the point of being unsafe or taking poorly calculated risks, but risks help you push beyond comfort. And as we know, if you're going to grow, you have to actually step outside of your comfort zone. And so, I'll ground this as an example. I tend to support our kids in, trying new things, or in, not always saying, well, I just want to do it this way. We'll try something different or try something new. Or, especially when it comes to sports participation, sometimes my kids get really nervous going to, let's say, a new training environment, or let's say I book a camp for them. Instead of like being excited about it, they just want to, but that's part of building some risk into their growth and development. And to me, I relish that. Whereas, moms, and again, gross generalization sometimes will be like, no, let them do what they're comfortable with. Like, let's not push them outside their comfort zone. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. I think there's benefit, because sometimes pushing them to risk is actually, they're not ready for it. It's not the right time. And so that's the beautiful balance of having a little bit of risk taking, but also a little bit of nurturing, knowing what's right in this particular situation. I think that's the benefit of having those two perspectives. Anyways, those are just some thoughts around risk versus safety. What are your thoughts, Ed, or what stories can you share?
I think one of the words I've prone to use a lot now these days is experimenting. And again, the risk versus safety. And you alluded to it for a few moments during your share there, that you want to know where your kids stand. What are they comfortable with? What are they not comfortable with? And and this is just me, if you just keep inside a bubble, sometimes that's not the best for the child, because you don't know what they can handle, what they don't, what they can't handle. And also, it's important for kids to build courage and awareness. So if you keep them too sheltered, you're probably working against them being more aware, regaining their awareness, and also the courage, because building courage and awareness, hey, let alone as dads, fathers, male givers, parents, we always need to build our courage and awareness. Why not our children at a young age? So I think it's really important to have that, the encouragement of protection, caution, but also have them stretch a little bit. So you know where they stand, and also where can you help them get to that next level? So that's what I'd add on with that.
Yeah. Some interesting, fascinating research around how moms and dads hold babies. And often dads will hold a baby facing out towards the world, as if to say, hey, look at the world that you can explore. Whereas moms tend to hold the baby facing in, comforting, nurturing, saying, it's okay, I'll keep you safe. So it's really fascinating when you look at those, they're almost biological differences. And again, the reason why this is valuable is because they're both valuable to the child, because it helps children build both courage. Hey, here's this world I can explore, but also awareness and safety. Hey, I know that I've got a home base that's safe, and I'll always be loved and comforted and accepted here. You need both, right? Without those both, a child is actually missing a bit. So those differences are good. Play styles. So play styles, dads, this is literally a fatherhood superpower. Often, rough and tumble, wrestling, spontaneous, not having to just, have everything there. You can pretty much make play out of anything. And so I think that's, something that dads, we can feel burdened, stressed. There's a lot going on. We've got work, we've got other demands, we've got finances. And sometimes, we're not interested in play as much, but it's actually one of the most powerful ways to connect. And when we embrace these natural strengths that we have, that actually really helps our children. And so, anyways, that's one side from the father piece. But then moms, they're nurturing play. I came home earlier today, and Kristen's just sitting on the floor with Ayana. There's this, wonderful music playing, and I'm not even sure what they were doing, but it just seemed like such a beautiful scene of this comfort, calm, nurturing, just simple play right there on the floor. Whereas me, I'd be like running around or moving, or I'd be doing things. Whereas she just creates this beautiful contrast of this very nurturing, very safe, comfortable play. So again, the idea is that these differences are beneficial to the child. And, this idea of play building healthy boundaries, rough and tumble play can build healthy boundaries. It can also build physical confidence. Your kids, mom will be like, no, don't jump off there. And dad will be like, yeah, go. You could do it. You can make it, right? Or there's that old not cartoon, but there's this image, right? Of a dad throwing a child up, and on one side is here's what dad sees. The child's a reasonable distance, like maybe a few inches from his hands. Whereas the picture on the right is what mom sees. The child is literally like 10 feet above in the air, right? That's just the difference in terms of how they see, these play things from a mom's and dad's perspectives. Anyways, the value of these different play styles is it helps build that physical confidence, understanding of boundaries, but also creates that emotional bond with their caregiver as well. And that's what moms are really great at. Anything you want to add there, Ed?
Yeah, not too much more I want to add, but what's running through my mind as we're going through this is having a healthy balance. That's running. You don't want too much of one, too much the other, but negotiate a healthy balance in regards to, the risk, safety, play styles, things like that, and have that combination of styles and, discuss it as parents together in regards to what works. Because I think we probably won't get a chance to talk about is how we were raised as kids, which is a whole other conversation piece. So I just saying the combination of both works out the best. What do you have to say about communication styles?
Well, I guess everyone is a little bit different here. And the fact you referenced the way we grow up, I think that plays a huge influence on our communication styles typically as parents. So I think the idea of, dads tend to be more action oriented and solution focused, like just get it done, versus the moms want to have conversations. They want to sit down and talk about it. They want to know how the kids are feeling. It's and I was raised by a mom who was very much like that, wanted to talk, wanted to get into the emotions, what's going on beneath it. And I was very resistant to that growing up. Little did I know that, now I recognize the importance and value. And I'm actually the dad who's trying to bring some of these conversations to my kids, and they're resistant to me. So I would say for me, this is an ongoing learning and adjusting piece for both parents, for moms and dads. So I would, and again, for me, I think I want to continue to grow and develop in this area to be more effective as a communicator, and to be the best, I'd say, listener, which is a very powerful communication skill I can for my kids as they grow through the different ages and stages. So I actually rely on Kristen a lot in this area because she's a little bit more intuitive than I am, and she can see things in ways that I am not necessarily seeing it, and it can help me slow down as opposed to picking up momentum and maybe talking when I shouldn't be talking. So I think, again, that goes to the benefit of having two different styles, two different approaches, two different unique skill sets or perspectives, and you bring it together and work through it together to be able to communicate effectively in the home and with your children. Plus, kids are all different. Right? One question might land perfectly with one kid, and the other kid, it like shuts them down. So that, to me, while communication styles and differences are beneficial, it's really an ongoing adaptation, I'd say.
Yeah. Just to add on what Drew is saying, I think it's good to have these combination styles with mums and dads, these generalizations, because it helps kids learn expression and problem solving. So they're getting the best of the mom world, getting best of the dad world in regards to communication. And just adding to what Drew said, it's an ongoing thing. No one is 100% on when it comes to communication. So it's a journey, not a race when it comes to communication styles. Drew, let's talk about why are these differences actually good? People are saying it's actually good to have differences. Why is it?
I mean, even before we get into our points here, the reality is the more we can appreciate and respect others' differences, especially in today's world, I think the more you prepare yourself with the skills needed to successfully, be in relationship with other people. And so it's just an important life skill, I would say, is that, learning these differences and people having differences and how to get along with them and relate with others. That's why it's important. But three specific points is it helps build more well-rounded kids. They've got emotional intelligence, they have resilience, they have security, they have independence. It also prepares them for real life, like I was just talking about. And ultimately, point three is that it models healthier relationships. Like, we all have a degree of unhealthiness in our relationships. I think that's just the reality. But how do we move towards a healthier dynamic in all of our relationships and help them see that? I think those for me are powerful differences or powerful benefits, and why we want to acknowledge the good that both moms and dads bring to the parenting process.
Yeah. For each point, I'll just add on to what Drew has shared. Building well-rounded kids, it teaches security plus independence. For preparing kids for real life, exposes different approaches, and having exposure to different approaches helps with flexibility. One needs to be flexible in this thing called life these days. So teaching that or showing that to kids at a very young age provides foundation as they grow. And then finally, modeling healthy relationships. Kids see cooperation despite differences. And it also teaches respect for diverse perspectives. So let's talk about common conflicts between parents, something that Drew and I think never happens, right, Drew?
I'm laughing because literally just before coming down to this podcast, we had one of these in our home of you're too strict versus you're too soft. I felt that Kristen was a little bit too soft in the way that she handled the situation. And I was like, come on, like this is repeat, right? We've talked about this before. So yeah, it absolutely can create a conflict. Another one could be you let them do too much versus you hold them back, right? And I mean, I could think of many examples in my parenting over the years where I've experienced these type of conflicts. And I think I go back to this 101% principle in managing these conflicts. What is the 1% that we can agree on? And then I want to give that 100% of my effort, because many times we focus on, the 99% that we disagree on, and we want to give that all of our effort, but it's not the healthiest way to move forward, and recognizing that both perspectives have value. And so it's how do you navigate those conflict points in ways that focus on that 1%? So the reality is if there's, being too soft, there's a heart of caring and love behind that choice, meaning that I believe that the child needs a little bit more comfort at this stage. And so, okay, comfort is valuable. Comfort is meaningful, and comfort helps build security. Okay, so let's focus here. Okay, then how do we make sure that this comfort doesn't lead over into being taken advantage of or allowing irresponsibility? As long as we can agree on that, then okay, great. We made that choice. We're going to work through it. And I agree that showing comfort and care, that's kind of how I'm approaching it now, having learned over the years how not to approach it, which is constantly sticking and focusing on your point and determining you're right, as opposed to saying, okay, what do we both agree on? That's to me the main thing moving forward, and recognizing that this is not so much about conflict. It's about how do we leverage complementary strengths together in the best way possible for our kids moving forward, knowing that we won't always agree, and that's still okay.
Excellent. And just to add on what Drew has shared with us, it's don't aim to parent the same. Aim to understand. I'm going to say that again. Aim to understand each other and talk about values, not just tactics. So have those conversations about values. And again, the aim is to understand each other, not to parent the same.
Ed, I want to jump onto that values piece. To me, that's one of the core areas that you really should know as parents. And I don't mean to, should on people. What I'm saying is that the more that you understand what your core or principal values are, the more aligned you can be in discussing decisions and ensuring that the decision does go back to what you both truly believe on, as well as making sure that you together know what your family's values are, because there may be differences between you and your partner in terms of what your core values are, but what are the 2 or 3 or 4 that do overlap and are common that you want to see brought about in your family? If you haven't done that before, I'd really encourage you to, and I'll talk briefly later about how you can get information about how to do that if you haven't done it yet.
All right, so let's wrap it up with practical takeaways for parents. Go for it.
Okay, 3 takeaways. 1, lean into your strengths. And while we were doing gross generalization of moms versus dads, your unique strength may fall in one of the ones that, you're a dad, but you're actually very expressive and really connected to your emotions. Well, that's a strength. Then lean into it. Okay. Takeaway 2, don't undermine, translate. And I always prefer to say, rather than, telling people what not to do, let's tell them what to do. And so you want to help your partner's style be understood by the child, not to point out how their approach is wrong or different than yours in a way that makes them be undermined. You definitely want to focus on, here's why mom feels this way, because this is really important to her, and I think you need to honor and respect that. So you want to be able to translate those values as opposed to undermining them. And then the third one is use the differences intentionally, right? So an example could be one, typically me, but as a parent, I like to encourage, just try something new, right? Jump out into this unknown, uncomfortable, and I'll be right here. We'll both be here to support you, but I want you to just try it out. And the other one might help do the reflection afterwards. Okay, so what was that like? What was uncomfortable for you, or what did you feel after you completed it? What did you learn about yourself? So you can work together on applying your differences intentionally to support your children.
All right. So let's review what we covered today. We covered the key differences. We also covered common conflict between parents, and then we have some practical takeaways Drew gave for parents. So core takeaways from it all today: kids benefit from both emotional security and independence building. Also, parenting differences are rooted in natural tendencies, not failures. And then the goal is not sameness, it's about balance and collaboration. So, Drew, what resource do we have for our watchers and viewers today?
The Connected Dad course is a great resource. In particular, in stage 4, we talk about how to collaborate more with your partner, how to build a strong parenting team. And in that, one of the exercises we have is called the values card sort. It's actually a way to get on the same page and understand your core values as well as your partner's core values, and then a process to be able to come up with what are the core values that we have for our family. So Connected Dad course, it's a 5-stage fatherhood developmental roadmap, how to go from stressed, overwhelmed, tired to being much more confident, calm, and connected. And I think that is now live and available for people to jump in and access that course. So that's our resource.
All right. Final wrap-up message we have for you. Your differences aren't a flaw in your parenting. They're the feature your kids need the most. So check that out. Also, too, make sure wherever you're listening or watching this, hit the like button and share it out with other people. So as always, we'd like to say thank you for giving the most important thing, your time, to watch or listen to the show. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and we'll chat you soon. Be well.